Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back. In this episode, we're going to take a step away from the M52. I have the oil pan sent off, getting welded up, and the head is getting resurfaced and cleaned as we speak. So those will be back in a few days and we'll dive back into the motor. But in the meantime, we're going to work on this transmission. Now, this is a ZF transmission I've been running since I did the swap about 4 or so years ago. They come in the E36, M3s, 328, 323s, and they are highly sought after. They are very stout and reliable for what they are, and a lot of companies are starting to make adapter plates and swap specific parts to start using these. So they have probably doubled, almost tripled in price just in the last 5 years. So if you have one, you're definitely going to want to keep the service up on it. There's a lot of wear points in this transmission that if you don't replace can become very troublesome, which is where I'm at now. I have a very bad fifth gear lean, which is the most common problem with these transmissions over time. The shifter should naturally sit in the middle of the throw, and over time the detent starts to seize up and it starts to wear down. It'll actually get stuck and just become useless. So the shifter itself just hangs out off on the right hand side, which can make going between some gears a little bit of a hassle as well. So we're going to put this shift detent kit in. This is very common. Probably every ZF you're going to come across is going to need one of these done at some point. Now this just replaces all of the bushings and detents and springs that are associated with each of the gears and just freshen it all up and make your shifting nice and tight and make it feel like back to factory. Now before we start working on the transmission, I'm going to pull the drain plug, get all the fluid out of it. Then we're going to take it outside and spray it down so we can get it nice and clean before we start working on it. I'm gonna hit it with some oven cleaner. So now that we got this all nice and clean, we got the fluid drained out of it, we're gonna start working on the shift detent. A lot of people are kind of intimidated by doing this job, but it's really pretty simple. Everything that comes with the kit for gears 5 and 6 are a bushing, a cap, and a snap ring. And gears 1 through 4 comes with a new bushing that is not from factory. This is an updated item from BMW. They come with their own pin and spring. And also for gears 5 and 6, you have these detents. Now, this is where the fault originally was from BMW. They had an oiling issue for gear 5. This would cause that spring and detent to seize inside of the cylinder it was riding in. And that's what would cause the fifth gear to lean, because you had no rebound from that spring just being stuck compressed. So we're gonna go ahead and knock these out. We're gonna start with gears 1 through 4. They're located right on the top of the transmission here. They're the easiest, so we're gonna go ahead and just get those done and get them out of the way. So the first thing that we're gonna do is remove the 3 caps on the top of the transmission. This is for gears 1 through 4. I'm just gonna use a punch here, put a hole in them, and pop them out. Pop right out. Now, as soon as you pull the caps, you'll be able to tell if this job has been done on the transmission before. You're going to want to pull the spring and the detent that is inside. Now this is where you'll be able to tell. This transmission from the factory only has this one detent. It's just a single cylinder that will slide up and down inside the bar in there. Now the new one comes with its own lubricated sleeve, just like all the other gears that we're gonna press into this transmission, and it has a smaller detent that will slide inside of that cylinder that we're gonna install. This is from the factory. This is the upgraded version. So that's how you'll be able to tell if this has been done before. This transmission, it has not been touched, so I already know that this is gonna make a nice improvement. I'm excited to get this done. Now I'm gonna go ahead and pull the spring and detents on the other two here. In the meantime, I have the new stuff sitting in ATF so it's nice and lubricated before I install it. Now this one was a huge pain to get this far, but I finally got it after a while of prying at it. So now that we have all the detents and spring pulled out for each gear, we're gonna install these updated sleeves. This is part of the kit. Something you really wanna note is all of these sleeves have a slit in the side so you can break them down in the future. You want that slit to face 90 degrees to either side of the transmission. Do not have it facing towards the rear or the front, as it'll affect some of the shifting components. We're going to use this drift tool, part 233110. Insert the sleeve over it. Slightly lubricate with some ATF. And point the slit 90 degrees to the side. Okay, get the tool on and drive it in. You'll hear the tone change when it's bottom out and you know the sleeve is in at the right depth. Then we will insert our detent. Slides right into place. And our spring. And we'll repeat the same thing for the other two gears as well. Then we will drive in the caps. Unlike gears 5 and 6, these are just pressure fit. These are not held in with snap rings. You're going to use drift tool number 232360. Perfectly accepts the cap and will bottom out at the right depth. And that covers gears 1 through 4. Now switching over to the side of the transmission, you have reverse and fifth gear. This part is a little bit more challenging. This is what spooks a lot of people into attempting this job, but it really isn't too bad. So I'll show you the steps to do that. So the first thing you're gonna wanna do is remove the snap rings. If they are OEM caps, they'll actually start to bulge from the pressure from the spring underneath and actually fill the holes on the snap ring. So I'm gonna hit them with the punch, see if I can expose the holes and see if we can get this snap ring and cap out of here. Well, that's one way to get it out. Now there's a difference between the reverse and fifth gear detents. This is the reverse detent. It has a larger hole and it has a totally flat surface that the detent rides on. Now the fifth gear has a smaller hole, as well as this is kind of curved. It's hard to see on camera, but in person you can definitely tell which one it is. The purpose of this hole being smaller is to try to prevent seizing, which is what happens from the factory, which is why you get that fifth gear lean. The idea is that this smaller hole will hold more fluid inside the cylinder, as well as this being rounded will allow a bit more fluid to pass by as well. Because these do have a hole in the bottom, I'm going to slide a pick down the cylinder, through the hole, and pull it out. Now inside here is where things get a bit tricky. This is the OEM sleeve. It's just like the new one we put in. As you can see, it's got a slit down the side. Now there's no specialty tool or a good way to pull this sleeve out of here. You have to work at it from this seam and just completely destroy this bushing to where it'll at least relieve some pressure and you can grab it and pull it out. So your only option is just to go kind of medieval on the thing. Make sure you don't shove it down into the transmission because it can fall inside there, but just do your best not to score the sides too bad and just go to town. Alright, so after a good bit of fuss, I got this sleeve out, and you see how mangled that you have to get this thing in order to get it out of that bore. I almost knocked it too far down in there, but I was able to save it. You also want to make sure that if there's any burrs or rough edges, that you take a file and you file them out so it's at least nice and smooth in here. So now that we got the old bushing removed, you want to install the new bushing. Now the bushings for reverse and fifth gear are identical. They're the same part numbers. The only thing that's going to be different is the depth at which you set them. Now this drift kit has two different size tools. While they look exactly the same, one is going to be a bit shorter than the other. For reverse gear, you want to use the longer one. It's part number 234023. Just like all the other parts, will lightly coat in ATF. Now this tool will bottom out at the perfect depth. So this part's very important. What you want to do once you have the reverse detent is make it so the ramp is pointing downward towards the drain bolt. It doesn't have to be perfect, it'll center itself out. Press the detent in, and the reverse is the thicker, stronger spring. And then we'll need to install the new cap and snap ring. For this one, you're going to use drift tool 234021. This is just enough to set the cap and the snap ring as well. I'm going to try and get this cap seated just enough to where I can rest this on top and then hammer them both into place. Now this part's a little bit of a pain. Once the cap is in deep enough to where you can try and get the snap ring just started, then you'll be able to hit it into place. Now that we got reverse done, you're going to want to repeat those same steps for fifth gear. Once the cap's out, remove the spring. Remove the detent. Okay, so now that we got the original bushing out of there, we're going to install the new bushing, this time using the shorter drift tool 234022. Then we grab the fifth gear detent. Now unlike the reverse where we had the ramp pointing down, this time we want the ramp facing up. We'll install the spring and the new cap and snap ring. Put the snap ring So that's how you install the detents on a ZF transmission. As you saw, the reverse and fifth gear are definitely a pain in the ass, but if you just stay patient and stay at it, you'll end up getting it done. It won't be too much of a fuss. So a few years back when I replaced the clutch, I did a new guide tube as well as a metal pivot pin. They have brass ones and plastic ones, but the metal one is the way to go. It won't change shape or deform over time. The fork was new at the time as well. It's a little bit worn, but we're gonna continue to use this, as well as throw in a new Sachs throwout bearing. And I'm gonna lube all this up with some white lithium grease. Put a dab on each of the pivot points, as well as where it rides on the guide tube. We'll slide the fork in, over the pin, and we'll lube up the pivot points on the throwout bearing. Like so. And this is the side that your slave cylinder pivots on, so as you push the clutch in, it pushes and releases the throwout bearing against the pressure plate. Alright guys, so that wraps up the refresh on this ZF Trans. All I have left to do is just install some automatic transmission fluid, but for the time being, I'm just going to put this in the side of the garage until we're ready to throw it on the motor. Thanks for watching. See you.